Hi again, it's another Tuesday video. So I just wanted to explain some tasks I'd like you to do before the lesson we've got on Friday, the live Teams lesson on Friday. So I think most of you were at the live Teams lesson last Friday, and so you kind of worked all the different activities. If for any reason you missed that lesson, then just make sure you go through the PowerPoint that we used, which was the water quality and treatment PowerPoint. I put it on the Moodle site. It's right at the very bottom of the hydrosphere section, so just make sure if you weren't that lesson, you've kind of completed all that stuff. So the main thing I sort of said for homework last week was to make sure you've completed all your notes on water treatment, so you know kind of all the different water treatment processes. We talked through those very quickly in the lesson, but obviously you need to know them sort of really well. So just make sure you're clear on what sort of things like sterilisation are, sedimentation, flocculation, and you can define them and explain those processes, because that does come up quite a lot in the exam. And also it's nice sort of just factual recall stuff, so it's not particularly difficult, just good stuff for sort of glossary of key terms, something like that. Anyway, so some stuff to do this week before the lesson on Friday. So I'm not going to set you too much to do actually. One thing I would like you to do in your resource booklet though, there's quite a nice table which you can have a go at on page 44i. I don't know how well you can see that one. You should all have your resource booklets now, so I'd like you to have a go at that without looking at your notes. So maybe just have it's all on water treatment. So maybe just have a look through your the notes that you've made. Have a look through the textbook. Check you're happy with it, and then have a go at that table, and then see how you've got on. It's June 2017 paper, and it's so it's on page 44i of your resource booklet. Now, what we're going to look at on Friday is we're going to start to look at the sort of growing demand for water globally, and we're going to sort of look at the sort of changing demand for water in different countries. So I'm not going to say too much about that at the moment, but what I'd like you to do is something a little bit different this week, is I want you to have a go at a stats test. Now, statistical tests you need to know for the exam. There's around 5 I think in total that you need to know. So you've got chi-square, t-test, Mann-Whitney U, Spearman's rank, maybe it's 4. But anyway, you need to know each of those stats tests when you'd use them. So some of those are tests for difference between two sets of data, and some of them are tests for correlation. So we're going to have a go at Spearman's rank. Partly I'm picking that one because I think we've done that one before in class, but it would be a good chance to have another go at it and just remind yourself of what a stats test is. So statistical tests, stats tests, are done when you're trying to see if there's a relationship between or difference between two sets of data. For the Spearman's rank, I mean, obviously you could just plot stuff on a scatter graph if you wanted to see if there's a relationship between two variables, and you could try and draw a line of best fit. The problem is, of course, a lot of relationships might just be due to chance, and a stats test allows you to see if there really is a relationship or if it's due to chance. And if it is due to chance, you know, how certain can you be that there's a relationship? Are you 90% certain, 95%, 99% certain? So it's that kind of idea. So say, really likely to come up in the exam, you need to know them, so good chance to have a practice at one. So you're going to need your textbook for this one to find the data. So I'm going to move the camera around in a second, and I'm going to use my little mini, and I say mini, mini whiteboard to explain what I'd like you to do. So just bear with me while I turn the camera around. So Spearman's rank is quite a well-known stats test. I think probably some of you will have done it in geography as well. So it's as I say, it's a bit of a sort of classic, this one. But it'd be nice to just have a bit of practice, because we haven't looked at Spearman's rank for a little while. So that's probably about as good as I think I'm going to get on the whiteboard. So Spearman's rank, as I say, is a stats test you do to test if there's a correlation or relationship between two sets of variables. So the formula, if you can't remember, it's RS, Spearman's rank, I don't know why it's written not SR, but RS, but anyway, is 1 minus, and then in brackets, 6 times by the sum of the d squareds, and underneath n3 minus n. So just explain what those things are. So n is the number of variables that you've got. So if you're testing to see the relationship between 10 different things, that'd be 10 times 10 times 10 minus 10. So that's just the number of samples. That's quite straightforward. And then on the top, this is 6 times that little sign there, sigma. That's the sum of, and then the d squareds. Okay, so the d squareds are the differences squared of the ranks. Now that probably doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense until I kind of show you how to do the stats test. So there's your formula, so you can write that one down in your notes. You might have it anyway, or be able to find it in your notes. We haven't used this one before. So in your textbook on page 109 you will see a table that looks a little bit like that, and you've got various countries down the side, and for each country you have a per capita water use, which you can see in the first column, so the first column after the listed countries, and then in the last column you have got a per capita wealth figure. Really, it says GDP per capita in US dollars. GDP is gross domestic product, so it's just the value of everything a country produces in a year divided by the number of people, so it's a sort of measure of wealth. So we're going to see if there's a relationship between water use per person, per capita, and wealth per person. So those are the variables that you're going to be using. So you can have your country, you can have written down here. Alright, so you can do them in the same order, so you're going to be doing this as a large table. So write your countries down there. And then you're going to have your per capita, I'm going to struggle to write it on here, per capita water use. And then obviously you have all the data for those. And then you're also, next to that, you can put the GDP per capita, which is the last column of the table. So you can write all this data in. I'd use A4 and I'd do it in landscape. And then the next column, you're going to have the rank of the first variable, the water use. So the country, for example, that uses the most water would have a rank of 1. I'm just looking at the data here, so it looks like the country that uses the most amount of water per person, not a massive surprise, is the USA, which I think in the list is the bottom country. So you'd have a rank of 1 for the USA. Second biggest user I think is Australia. Is up near the top, so that's a rank of 2, and you keep going like that. If you have any tied ranks, so let's say you had two countries that were 4th equal, so they're occupying 4th and 5th positions, you'd give each of them a rank of 4.5, and then the next country would have a rank of 6. So rank of water use, then you do the rank of the wealth, so the rank of the GDP, exactly the same format, so the country with the highest GDP per capita, which looking at the data is the USA, would again have a rank of 1, and then again you'd rank them in the same way, highest down to lowest. And then the next column is the difference in the ranks. So if, for example, and I'm making this up, if for example Australia had a rank of 2 for that and a rank of 4 for that, the difference of course between 2 and 4 is 2. So the difference between the ranks you put there, and then the last column is you just square this number, so you square the differences. So for example this one, the difference is 2, you square that, and that'll be 4. Hopefully that rings some bells. You add up the last column, excuse me, so that's the sum of the d squareds, and then you put that into the top of the equation. So if you remember, the top of the equation was 6 times by the sum of the d squareds. Okay, and that is your Spearman's rank correlation coefficient. Have a go at it. One of the classic things that people forget to do is to take whatever they've calculated in the brackets away from 1, so don't forget to do that. And on Friday, it'll be quite interesting to see if everyone gets the same number. And then of course with any stats test, what we'll have to do is we'll have to look that up and compare that with a critical value, but we'll maybe save that for Friday's lesson. So it's really important this week that you do your stats test, have a go at it. If you get stuck, just drop me an email, not a problem at all. But have a go at the stats test and see if you can plug the numbers into that equation, and let's see if we get the same number out. With Spearman's rank, I should just mention before we finish, the number, and this is a good way of checking whether you've done it correctly, the number that you calculate when you put it through the equation should always be between +1 and -1. Alright, so if you get a number that's outside of that, then obviously you've calculated something incorrectly. If it's close to +1, it means it's a positive correlation. As one thing goes up, the other thing goes up. If it's a negative number or close to -1, then it means it's a negative correlation. So it's pretty logical. So as one thing goes up, the other thing goes down. And if it's around about 0, it probably means there isn't really much of a correlation. So again, just see kind of where your number fits, and we'll compare that to the critical value on Friday's Teams lesson. Alright, hopefully that all makes sense. So it shouldn't take you too long. Maybe 10 minutes to do the question in the booklet, and perhaps the stats test will take you maybe half an hour or so to write out and have a go at. Alright, good stuff guys. I will see you on Friday for the Teams lesson.